Okay, everyone. Well, let's get started. Welcome again, and thank you for joining today's UDL free webinar, SEL and UDL New Avenues to Implementation. In this session, we'll explore how SEL and UDL work together to reduce barriers and strengthen learner agency using CAST's Circle Up framework. Today's conversation will move from research to practice, highlighting how evidence-based SEL models can be integrated into UDL-aligned design to support motivation, self-regulation, and inclusive learning environments. We're excited to be joined by Dr. Shauntā Singer, Bill Wilmot, Tania Garcia, and in a bit we'll have Lynnette Sepulveda, who bring perspectives from research, professional learning, and district level implementation. Throughout the session, we'll continue sharing accessible links and resources in the chat. And with that, I'll turn it over to our presenters.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Fabian. Welcome, everyone. We're very excited to have everyone here. Shauntā and I are your tour guides of Circle Up, but we're most excited that we have with us a couple of practitioners from Houston, Texas, the Aldine Independent School District, who've been co-developing and implementing Circle Up along with us over the last few years. I'm going to hand it over to Shauntā to just quickly introduce herself.
Yeah, hello, good day, everyone, or good night for some of you, perhaps, given where we see everyone is from. As Bill said, my name is Shauntā Singer, and I am a senior research scientist here at CAST. I'm super excited. Like I said, this is exciting because we get to hear from the practitioners in the field, and I hope that you all will make this as much of an engagement discussion as it is of us giving you some information about our project. And yeah, I look forward to our conversation together today.
And my name is Bill Wilmot. I'm a senior implementation professional learning specialist at CAST and the co-director of the Circle Up project, and excited to share this with you all. I've been at CAST for about 8 years, but before that I was at a school that focused on integrating academic, social, and emotional learning, and that's what Circle Up is focused on. And we have incredible partners in the Aldine Independent School District. We've worked with 9 schools in the district. I don't know, probably about 150 educators at this point and thousands of students. And we have 2 guest stars here today to tell us about what that experience has been like. So we're working with teachers, we're working with instructional specialists who are playing a key kind of coaching role. Teachers are implementing in their classrooms and constantly giving us feedback and helping us update the project and the program. And then we're working with administrators and district personnel across the whole district. So I'm going to hand it over to Tania Garcia just to do a quick introduction of herself. And Lynnette Sepulveda is on her way. She is rushing to get to where she can join us, and we'll have her do an intro when we get to her part. But Ms. Garcia, can you do a quick intro for us? Who are you? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your role in the project.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tania Garcia. I am a 4th grade self-contained teacher here at Aldine ISD, and I am a mom of 2, and I'm so excited to share all these amazing tools that have helped me build relationships in my classroom.
Thank you so much. All right. We wanted to acknowledge all of our partners. These are district leads in Aldine, Tara Thompson, Angel Webb, amazing partners who coordinate everything on the Aldine side with us. And then there are a number of other partners that we work with. Dr. Ross Green is the originator of Collaborative and Proactive Solutions, which is a non-punitive response to unmet expectations. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then 2 people from Check and Connect, which is a mentoring program that is kind of targeting the students who are most disengaged because of attendance, academic issues, behavior issues. Dr. James Houseworth is a principal investigator there. And Jana Ferguson has been doing all of the support of mentors and counselors on the ground in the schools. So we wanted to acknowledge our amazing partners. Some of our goals for today, we want you to better understand some of the theory behind Circle Up. As Fabian said, this is very much a research practice partnership project. But then we also want to dive into the nitty-gritty and explore some of the Circle Up tools and strategies and hear more about what those look like in practice. Share in the chat if you want to. What are your goals? What are you hoping to get out of the next hour together? And or what is a situation related to emotion in learning that's not going the way that you hoped? We always have these moments, right, in our classrooms, in our schools. Not everything is perfect. We need to acknowledge that from the beginning. We're always growing. We're always learning. That to me is really at the heart of what Circle Up is all about, is how do we learn from the experiences and emotions of our young learners. So share those in the chat. As you know, CAST leads, inspires, and convenes a global community to design equitable, inclusive learning experiences through our Universal Design for Learning framework. So this project is really about bringing that framework and the amazing work of social emotional learning across all different organizations and frameworks together to think about how do these complement each other and how do we operationalize that? How do we make that real? Because what we often see are, if you're familiar with the CASTLE framework, which is a national, international social emotional learning framework, that's kind of outlined on the left side. During our SEL programs and our SEL blocks, these are the competencies that we're trying to build among our learners: self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness, right? Amazing skills that don't just serve them for the next 3 days, the next 3 weeks, but serve them for an entire lifetime. And sometimes during our academic learning, they're getting mixed messages, right? So we're trying to build self-awareness and we're not providing them with an opportunity to reflect on their learning. We're trying to build self-management in SEL and there's no opportunity to set goals. We're trying to build responsible decision-making and there aren't opportunities to make real decisions about your learning. We're trying to build relationship skills and there's no opportunity for authentic collaboration around learning and action in the world. And we're trying to build social awareness, but there's no opportunity to build empathy in a learning context. So for anybody who knows UDL, you'll know that UDL addresses a lot of these things on the right side and creates these opportunities. And so there's a great kind of tie together with social emotional learning, with the CASTLE framework and many other SEL frameworks and programs. So this is one of the mismatches and mixed messages that we're trying to address with Circle Up. So I'm going to hand it over to Shauntā to do the introduction for us of what is Circle Up all about.
This was great. Yes, but before we get started, Lynnette has joined us, and so I want to give her an opportunity just to introduce herself and her role in the Circle Up project.
Welcome,
Hello,
Lynnette.
everyone. Thank you so much for your understanding. I am the instructional specialist at Jones Elementary, so in Aldine. So I am supporting teachers as the reading instructional specialist, but I was over top of as the instructional specialist for Circle Up on our campus. So this was the first year that we were implementing that, and I was there to support the teachers throughout that process.
Awesome. Thanks, Lynnette. And of course, we will hear more about her and her experience with Circle Up in just a second. But yes, okay, so what is Circle Up? So before we get into it, I want to actually ground us into what Circle Up is. And Circle Up is really about helping students understand themselves as learners, right? How they're feeling, what might be getting in the way towards meeting their progress, towards meeting their learning goals, but it also gives students language for their experiences, and it also gives teachers tools to respond to those experiences in real time. And so if you, just building on that, it's about really bringing together things that have often, as Bill said, been treated separately, like the academic learning, social learning, and emotional experiences, right? Instead of those things being disconnected, Circle Up really does integrate these into supporting students in real time during that actual learning process. And so for students, it creates a space for them to understand what's going on for them internally, emotionally, as they are experiencing different elements, phases, towards their learning, but also it gives them an opportunity to reflect on learning and then to begin to plan for what happens in the future if things arise or emotions arise during this learning process. And then for teachers, it provides insight into what's helping students move forward, what may be barriers for them in meeting their learning goals, and giving them ways to respond more intentionally. So I want to pause for a second here and just share a reflection from one of our administrators. They said, our biggest Circle Up celebration this past year centered on empowering students' voices, fostering collaboration, and building community. And so what stands out to me is that the impact they're naming here isn't just about the tools or the strategies, right? It's about the student voice. It's about the collaboration. It's about community. And these are not just small shifts if you think about it. These are foundations for how students experience learning, right? And so we're seeing that when students are a part of Circle Up, students feel heard, they feel connected, and then everything else really kind of builds on that. Their engagement, their participation, and even achievement has been strengthened. Bill, you can go on to the next slide. And so this is actually an important idea here where you think about this core challenge that Circle Up is meant to address. It's thinking about these challenging behaviors that we are often confronted with, that we see in students, right? And it's usually not just one thing, right? So it's the resulting or the behavior results as a combination of many things, right? It could be that instruction isn't fully accessible yet. It could be that students are still developing within their social and emotional skills. And it can be this mismatch or disconnect with the demands of the classroom that may make students feel overwhelmed at that particular moment. And so all of these things work together to manifest themselves into what we see on the front as challenging behavior. And so Circle Up really does ask us to really prevent ourselves from asking what's wrong with the student. And it really does help us shift to ask ourselves what might be getting in the way, right, of students meeting their learning goals, and how can we respond? And so these things all truly do work together to, when we look at the behavior, we don't look at just the cause of behavior or just the behavior itself, but also those underlying reasons for why these behaviors may come to the forefront. All right, Bill, next. So then we have this choice, right? Because sometimes we're faced with, we get choice, right? And so when we see these challenges behavior, we really want to concentrate on how we respond to these behaviors. So one path is to do what typically we sometimes traditionally do, is to react to the behavior, right? We provide a consequence or a punishment and we react to the moment, right? Because we need to address that behavior there and then. We address what is happening on the surface. But sometimes and so this is good maybe in the moment. Sometimes we may see some change in behavior, short-term change, right? But the other path is to stop and to think about what may be the reasons underneath why those behaviors are manifesting, right? This gives us an opportunity to solve the problem and perhaps redesign our environment, our learning instruction, or give us a way to be more intentional about solving the why behind what a student may be experiencing. And so this is this path that Circle Up takes, right? Circle Up is designed to support this second path. It's helping us to understand, it's helping us to problem solve, and really to respond to these challenging behaviors more intentionally. All right, Bill? And so Circle Up is not just one thing, right? It's really made up of these key components that actually work together. And so because we are here at CAST, at the foundation of Circle Up is Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, right? It's really about anticipating barriers really from the start and designing learning so that students can truly can access, but also build agency over time, right? When we have these Circle Up tools and strategies, these are what brings kind of that the emotional and social side of learning into like the day-to-day experiences that students and for students and teachers. That's our Circle Up's tools and strategies. And then we have kind of these outside frameworks or programs that really do address kind of that problem solving piece. So we have collaborative and proactive solutions, or CPS, which in Texas, I will say collaborative and proactive solutions because CPS is a different kind of agency, but collaborative and proactive solutions kind of gives us structure into a way to understand what's behind these concerning behaviors that students may be exhibiting. And what I love about it is that it really does involve students to not only become aware of what we call unmet expectations, but also they become fundamental in helping us create solutions for those concerning behaviors. And then last, and that is, it's important to note here that that's a tier 2 intervention. And so with this particular framework, we either work one-on-one with students or we work in small groups. So it's considered tier 2. And then we have Check and Connect, where we, which operates as a school level. It's a tier 3 support, if you will, where we have gathered data from the district itself to intervene with students who have been found to need some more intensive supports. And so all of these pieces really do work together to design for learners and to respond to these, to respond to them in more intentional ways. All right, Bill. Bill is my trusty slideshow presenter. Thank you. So again, like I said, we have this opportunity to redesign and then also to problem solve. If we go back to that idea, we can see that Circle Up is really, that's the pathway that Circle Up takes. So on one side, we have this redesign. And here is where we take Universal Design for Learning and the Circle Up tools and strategies, to help us anticipate barriers and then to design instruction in a way really that supports students from the very start, right? And then on the other side, we have a collaborative and proactive solutions and Check and Connect that really supports students who may be already experiencing challenges. And so these particular frameworks help us to understand what's going on from a student's perspective, and then we work with students to address those concerning behaviors. And so it's not an either or thing. We're really doing both, right? We're designing proactively, and then we're able to respond when needed to ensure that the students do have access, that their emotions are addressed, and we actually are giving them some support to work through those learning experiences. All right, we could go to the next slide. So on this slide here, there's a graphic, right? And on the left side, we have the UDL guidelines, and then we have a barrier in the middle. And on the right, we have a goal. And so if you notice the arrows are there, they're going above, they're going through, they're going around, because we recognize that learners are going to take multiple pathways to getting to the goal, right? And this is one of the core ideas of UDL, right? That learners are variable. There's no such thing as an average learner. If you're familiar with UDL, we say that quite often. Students come with us with different experiences, different strengths, but Circle Up recognizes that they come to us with different emotions, different emotional states. And then when they're coming to us with these emotional states within the learning environment, right? And because of that, UDL wants to ensure that we are providing multiple pathways to reaching these goals. So this visual represents that idea. It shows that there's a single goal, but that there's multiple ways for students to get there. And part of what shapes those pathways is emotions. We know that students experience emotions for different reasons, and that students may feel confident during particular tasks. They may feel frustrated at different times, or they may come to us with anxiety, or very engaged, not too engaged, right? And so when we are able to, the circle of strategies allow us to really help students become aware of those emotions and also give them tools for how to address those emotions during these particular learning tasks. Next slide, if you will. And so, of course, as I said, anything related to CAS is going to be grounded in UDL, right? So when we look at the guidelines, we're looking at the guidelines as a tool, right? And it's important to note here that when we iterated on the UDL guidelines 3.0 back in July 2025, 2024, I'm sorry, July of 2024, we really did want to center students, the learners in the middle, right? However, the guidelines still serve as a way to obtain language for our design, right? We're still talking about learner variability, right? So we still have that research grounded in neuroscience and cognitive science and the learning sciences and the sciences. And it still does provide tangible ways to use this information in the classroom. And even just as important, the UDL guidelines can be used as a tool, right? So a tool for anticipating barriers, for what we can do when we encounter these barriers. And again, we're wanting to make sure that the guidelines are used as a guidance tool, but also to help us to help emphasize the who of learning, which are our students. Next slide, Bill. And so when it relates to the Circle Up project, we've noticed that we've had both short-term outcomes and long-term outcomes, okay? And in the short term, we saw that there were some shifts in how students were showing up, right? There were greater self-awareness. There was increased engagement regarding how they were, recognizing how they were feeling, what they were doing, what they were thinking. We also saw that there were changes in teachers, right? So as Tania mentioned, teachers began to find that they were able to build more stronger relationships with their students. And there was also this increased sense of efficacy in how they were able to support students' social emotional learning during the time. And then at the school level, right, we started to see shifts in things like attendance, right? We started to see shifts in overall behavior and students talking about their overall sense of belonging. I think what's important here is also some of the long-term shifts, right? So these short-term shifts really did build over time. And so it led to deeper outcomes, which are those improvements in overall student well-being. And in some cases, teachers believe that there were some changes in academic achievement, right? There were those stronger teacher-student relationships, and then a stronger efficacy within the cultures and the system. So it isn't just about implementing the tools, right? It was really about how the tools created conditions for these sustained change and approaches to behaviors. And then the last thing I will just mention is these quotes. And Bill, you can go to the next slide, that really kind of bring out some of what I was just mentioning with those short and long-term goal outcomes that we found. The first quote that says, students are thinking before reacting and setting themselves up for the lesson of the day, is really about students, us moving from reacting in the moment to being more intentional, and to students being prepared for learning. And that's what's powerful here, right? It wasn't just about the behavior. It was about students being self-aware, right? Students having self-regulation or exhibiting self-regulation, and really being ready, their readiness to engage in the lesson for the day. And then the second quote reflects what's happening on the teacher side. So the teachers being able to lean into actually listening to students. The quote here says teachers really leaned into listening to students and finding out what was getting in their way. And it completely shifted the tone of their classroom. So when this happens, if you think about it, this overall shift is a shift in culture. It's a shift in the tone of the classroom. And so I am super excited, not only to stop talking because I'm starting to get hoarse here, but to transition to Lynnette, who can share with you firsthand about what she found when she began to support teachers in using circle up strategies and tools.
Thank you so much, Shauntā.
Of
Yes,
course.
from my perspective, I actually got to see this across multiple classrooms. So that's the great thing of being an instructional specialist and incorporating this with Circle Up, is that I got to see the planning part of how we were going to figure out putting this into place with our school campus and our initiatives there, as well as district ones, as well as then our curriculum. So I got to see all the moving parts come together. And going into the classrooms, the main piece that I really noticed was that there was a calm, reflective start to the lessons. I put on this slide the emotion circle because teachers really honed in on this piece as a way to start their day and to start their lesson. I particularly noticed a teacher who was in a three-way split. So she has 3 classrooms coming in time after time. And no matter what time I went in the day, she would start with this and you would see the students engage with the app. They quickly put their emotions into place. She would give an overview of what the lesson was going to be about that day, and they would begin to respond how they were going to feel about that specific topic. She had a mix of students. She had inclusion, she had ESL, she had students who were in our GAP program, so they have behavioral concerns. She had all that happening in her room, but you wouldn't know it when you came in. Everyone was engaged, they were giving her the response, and she was walking around as well as her inclusion teacher. And the main thing that I noticed from this is even if a student had a negative emotion or didn't like what was coming up in the lesson, they would be asked, why do you feel that way? Or can you type why in the app? So they had the option to express it orally or to even type it into the app so that they didn't have to say it out loud. Quickly then the teacher would respond or try and give a segue into how they were going to overcome that barrier of that feeling. I also got to see this in a resource classroom, which is a completely different setting, and seeing this used in a small group. These are students who were not interested in learning the lesson for the day, but they would express their feeling. The teacher would respond why and ask what was going on as to why they felt that way. I noticed in some settings, one student would have a very positive viewpoint and the other one a negative. And a conversation would begin to why there was a difference between the positive and the negative outlook. I've also experienced this coming back at the end of the lesson and students changing how they felt from the beginning to the end. So it can be used as a way to check in multiple times. And you may think it's something so very simple, but it really allows for students to be heard and for them to express, like they don't know always the vocabulary to say what they feel, but this allowed them to put it into words. And just that release was so important. The other very powerful piece that we were able to do was lab sites. I know this was a new thing that we actually pushed from Aldine to happen because this is a way that we learn in Aldine. We love to have the opportunity to plan something, try it out with real students, and then get feedback about the process. So you get to kind of have a practice in real time. And we wanted to fully understand how Circle Up works with the curriculum. So the picture I included here is actually from my campus on our lab site day. So we were able to plan a reading lesson using Amplify Texas, which will be Bluebonnet. If there's anyone here from Texas, this is the curriculum for reading. And we were able to find a way to incorporate Circle Up strategies into it. This was a different strategy that we put into place. So this one was for connection corners. So there's corners around the room that the students had to put a connection that they had to the topic that we were expressing that day within the lesson. And so they got to have conversations. We got to listen in and hear what they were thinking. But during this whole process, we were learning to how we could make the connection between the two. And it was amazing because modeling was happening. I ended up actually modeling the lesson and preparing it to in one of the three-way split classrooms. So these were not even my students. I had observed them, but they quickly engaged with everything, even though they weren't my actual students. Additionally, while we were there, we started to realize there were opportunities that we could coach in and support each other. So that coaching was happening in the moment and in discussion of a debrief later. With this lab site day as well, though, we put a Plan B conversation in place after instruction. And we looked at the students in this actual lesson and discovered a student who was struggling to participate. We kind of asked the teacher a little bit of questions, but that's the beauty of the Plan B conversation. It's not about guessing why the student isn't participating. It's about asking them. So I had the opportunity as well to interact in a Plan B conversation with the student as to why they were kind of reluctant to participate in this conversation in the corner with their peers. And we discovered that even as he came in, he was crying and didn't want to respond, that quickly through the protocol of the Plan B conversation, I was able to not only find out why he was upset, but come up with a response to how we could prevent the feeling that he was having in the future, and that he was in agreement, even developing the process to how we could make him feel more comfortable to participate later. The teacher was extremely receptive of this, and I will tell you, I see him every day at the end at dismissal for car rider, and I have seen a shift from that day forward that he is happy and leaving the school in a much better attitude than I previously saw him leave the school. So I believe this had an impact as well on his day. So we really wanted to leave an opportunity because there isn't always a chance to really ask someone who's in the thick of this to how it really works. So I wanted to open up some space that you would be able to ask some questions. I have some background in how we've implemented this on the campus. I have some background in how I've helped with planning and coaching. I've also seen how it's created growth and the impact that it has had. So I'd be happy to take any questions. However, Bill, you want to manage that, or Shauntā, I'll be happy to respond.
We're going to gather questions and then come back to them at the end. So definitely put your questions in the chat or the Q&A feature, and we will gather them all together and get to them at the end. So I'm going to quickly kind of dive into some of the theory behind Circle Up, but then I want to get to Ms. Garcia so that we can see some of these tools in action. So as we said, we're trying to integrate social emotional learning and academic learning. And we're thinking, you can kind of think of it as the before, during, and after of any learning experience. So before a learning experience, students are anticipating what that's going to be like. They're making some appraisal of that learning experience. During, there's some level of engagement, either affective, like it means something to me, or cognitive, I'm really thinking through this challenge, or behaviorally engaged, I'm kind of focused on the goal and the task. And then there's some appraisal afterwards, like how did that go for me? Did I learn anything? What did I get out of that? And then that cycles back around to their engagement in the next lesson. So that's really the kind of the scale that we were thinking about, trying to really zoom into a learning experience and the social and emotional aspects of that. So out of that came a focus on three big themes. Resilient learning, that is, if students hit a bump, how do we support them to keep going? Meaningful learning, helping students ignite their passion for learning. How do we make it meaningful and emotionally engaging for them? And strategic learning, how do we help them be thoughtful and strategic in their approach to any learning experience? And each of those themes leads to different types of engagement, right? Behavioral engagement, students remain focused on a goal. through this resilient learning, through meaningful learning, they're focused on what really matters to them. And strategic learning, they're thinking through the challenges and problems that we're posing to them every day. So a little bit more on each of those. So these really formed kind of the backbone of the research that we used to create these tools that we co-designed with the teachers and instructional specialists in Aldine. So the resilient learning pattern is based on growth mindset and learning orientation and leads to increases in self-efficacy and behavioral engagement. So it's that idea that when I face a challenge, I'm making some kind of causal attribution of why I was successful or not, and that's affecting my mindset and affecting my learning orientation, all of which has an emotional component and leads to some appraisal of my self-efficacy, right? Am I able to do this or am I not? How confident am I? Which leads to engagement during a learning experience. And we'll talk about a tool related to that. And then the meaningful learning pattern is really looking at the dynamic interplay between is this content relevant to me? Am I interested in it? And to what degree do I own this goal? If any one of those things heads in a positive direction, then we are seeing students more affectively engaged. And then the final learning pattern, the strategic learning pattern, being strategic in your learning goals, really starts from understanding a learning goal, leading to doing some active, thoughtful planning for that learning goal, leading to kind of really thinking through the new learning that you're engaged in. And then at the end of that learning experience, there's some interpretation. Was I successful? Was I not successful? And what's the so what of that, right? And you can imagine there's emotional experiences throughout that whole process. And that interpretation at the end leads back to my understanding and my engagement in the future, right? If I interpret this as I was not successful and it's because I'm no good at math, right? That's an interpretation that's going to send students in one direction. A lot of the tools are designed to kind of shape students' interpretation to send them in a more productive direction of what's a strategy that I could use differently next time. So that leads us right up to the circle of tools and strategies. And with that, I'm going to introduce Ms. Tania Garcia, who's going to show us how some of those tools played out in her classroom. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the tools and strategies and get to questions. The purpose of the tools is really to raise awareness, both for students and then for teachers. And then the strategies are, okay, now I'm aware of how I'm feeling. Now I know that I'm not confident about this learning experience coming up. What am I going to do about it? That's what the strategies are focused on. Ms. Garcia.
All right. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to be talking about how I use some of these tools in my classroom. And just to start off, I do want to say that um, this project really helped me build positive relationships because not only did students start to take ownership of their emotions, but then we were able to incorporate it into academics and they started taking ownership of their learning, which was really amazing to see. So here are connection corners is a tool that is used for engagement and to build on background knowledge. So in this tool, you'll have a topic or a question, and the students will connect to it with at home, whether there's something they do at home or they have at home that connects to the topic, at school, on the internet, and in the world. So as you can see here, this is actually part of my planning. And the question was, we were starting the water cycle lesson. And just to start off at the beginning of the unit, I just wanted to talk about why water was important. And so I wrote down, what to expect, some ideas, but then they were able to tell me why or how water was important or useful at home, at school, on the internet, and in the world. So I really love this strategy because it really gets the students engaged and involved from early on in the lesson, and it gets them excited for whatever it is that we're going to be learning about for the day or the week or whatever it is. I do also want to mention that I am a bilingual teacher, so I do work with English language learners and even newcomers as well. And so this was amazing because it is also in Spanish for them. So yeah, so what I did is I gave students sticky notes, and sometimes you can do it in different ways. I would either number them from 1 through 4, so that way they only have reflect on one section rather than giving it them all at once, or I'll put them in groups, and there will be 4 groups, and then as a group they're able to collaborate on a sticky note. They will get up and go put it wherever it belongs to. So I love this tool because it just allows them to reflect on their experiences and what they have learned um, in the past. So here, as you can see, I used it for a natural resource lesson, and I did it a little bit different. So you don't have to just stick with at home, at work, not at work, sorry, at home, at school, in the world, or in the internet, but instead, here the question was, what are some advantages and disadvantages of using, recycling, disposing, and conserving natural resources. So I changed the little corners to each of those 4 topics there. And here, as you can see, I had them in groups. And so they talked about the advantages and disadvantages of using natural resources. Another group did conserving, while the other did recycling and disposing natural resources. So we did this at the beginning of our natural resources lesson before we started talking about it. And again, it's just an amazing tool to get them engaged and excited about their learning. So I've seen some questions on how it looks like embedded into lessons. So here is an example of the tool that Ms. Sepulveda was talking about, the app. This is an example for math, the first one. And as you can see, I said I was bilingual teacher. So the question says, or the goal was, I am able to solve word problems that involve the sum and difference of fractions. And here we have a student who wrote their goal. Then they rated how confident they feel or felt. The student felt 3 stars, which is neutral. And then they get to type in why they feel that way. And here, as you can see, it says, I got a 50 because I thought that the first question was minus and not plus. And as you can see, the student already here is acknowledging what went wrong. They're taking that ownership of their learning already, and just with just this tool. Then they have a question on what strategy can they use for it, and they're going to use an emotion strategy. That's what they chose for this. Now, the emotion strategy could be anything like taking a deep breath, a calming strategy, or just like a reset strategy that I'm sure Bill will talk more about that later on. On the next one, this is part of our Bluebonnet lesson. It was our Treasure Island lesson. And so what I did is I asked them, the goal was, I know what Jim learns about silver and I can infer his intentions. So here the student wrote the goal. That was a goal for everybody. Then they told me how they felt. And here, as you can see, they chose angry. And then they explain why they feel angry. So I feel angry because Silver betrayed and Jim trusted him. So in this story, Silver betrays Jim. I don't know if anybody from Texas has taught this lesson before, but this is another great example on how you can incorporate it into your lesson. So not only do students learn to understand how they feel, but then they can also apply it to characters from lessons that they're learning about in their lessons. So I use this to informally assess how they're doing, and I'm able to adjust right then and there. So for example, on the math lesson, I was able to, at the end of the day during my intervention time, okay, like I pulled the students aside who I saw did not meet their goal or did not get a passing grade on their exit ticket, and we were able to work on it. So I love the reflection tool because again, it just allows them to take ownership of their learning. And not just that, the app is a safe place for the students to be able to reflect. Sometimes students can be embarrassed or they're shy and they don't really want to ask for help sometimes, and this tool really allowed them to do that. Now they didn't have to do it on the app. We also had a printed version of them, and I put them in a little plastic sleeve, and the students just use the expo marker. The only thing with that was that sometimes I would forget who needed like immediate help, because then after they would erase it. And so that's why I really like the app instead, because I have a track record of, okay, I need to meet with this person or vice versa. So here is a motion circle in another ELA lesson for Blue Bonnet, and this was part of our contemporary fiction lesson. And the students had to make inferences about how the character changed throughout the story. And so the question was, how does Celeste's emotions change over the course of the scene in the principal's office? What happens that leads you to make this inference? So the students had to choose an emotion in the circle and then explain how she changed from the beginning to the end. And this story, Celeste is going through many different emotions throughout each lesson because her grandmother had passed away and her friends were not being. She starts to receive letters from her grandmother who had already passed away, and her friends are saying rude things to her because they're telling her that she needs to accept that her grandmother is gone, but her grandmother had set this up for her to receive like very traditional and like things that she used to do with her. It was like cooking recipes that they used to do together. So it was a very, very nice story and lesson overall. But again, students are not just understanding how they feel, but then they get to apply it into the lesson and understand uh, the emotions of a character. So they get to analyze them, identify the feelings, they track the changes, and of course, which is very important, supporting their answers with evidence, which is a main thing that we do on a daily basis. Now, I know I don't have another example of the emotion circle, but I do want to talk about Ms. Sepulveda mentioned about her teacher who would just start off the day with the emotion circle. I also start off my day with the emotion circle, but instead of them telling me on my board, I have like, how are you feeling today? And I have magnets. So every day, that is how I take like their attendance, and also students just put their name to either the yellow, the red, the blue, or the green, and then they're able to either just come tell me later on or just write me a note how they're feeling, and then I just check back on them afterwards. And I've got to learn so much from my students with just the emotion circle alone, because it allows you to understand why they're performing a certain way, why they're behaving a certain way, and why they're just so disengaged. You come to find out that unfortunately, a lot of these students don't have an ideal home environment, and they are going through a lot, and sometimes they just want to be heard. They want to be cared for, and the moment that they start to feel that you care for them and like you're checking in on them, they will start showing up for you as well, which I thought was very important. And overall, with my experience with Circle Up, it has been great to see how my students have grown from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, and just the relationships that you build and the connections, and not just that, the growth. The impact has been positive for each of the tools that we have used, and I hope that you guys get to try it as well.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. You've talked consistently since you started using this about the relationships and how that's changed your relationships with students, like just getting to know them, getting to understand who they are, and having deeper relationships with your students. So that's just a taste of some of the Circle Up tools. There are more. Uh, uh, I won't cover the ones that we've already talked about. The goal meter is really something that you do at the beginning of a lesson to help students anticipate what that lesson is going to be like, and then reflection tool used at the end of the lesson. The one we haven't talked about at all are the resilient message cards, which are really messaging tools for teachers to help them plan out how do I want to embed growth mindset supportive messages into my lessons. And then the strategies we've talked about. We talked about some of the reset strategies. And these strategies live on little cards. So students can grab that card and read the strategy. They also exist on the app so that they can access them that way. So the reset strategies are really focused on emotion. The engage, build knowledge, and plan strategies, you'll notice, are lined up to the guidelines in color. And so this is really helping students identify strategies that are going to be helpful for them when they need to build background knowledge, or when they need to make a plan, or when they need to engage with learning. And by the act of a student choosing a particular strategy, it's giving information to teachers that a student might perceive a barrier in that area. So that's an area to address. And then there's this magical feedback loop that happens. And it becomes very natural where teachers have great ideas about how they're going to design a lesson. They put that into practice in a learning experience, and then students have a range of different reactions to that, right? Sometimes they're excited, sometimes they're not, sometimes they're frustrated. And then we use that information to inform our next steps, right? The student engagement, the student reflection, the student work all inform how we're going to approach that student and all students in the design of learning the next day. So that's our quick vision window into Circle Up. But now we want to get to a lot of your questions that have been flowing in the chat. Shauntā, have you seen one? What is a good place to start? I saw one about the Plan B conversations and how you might implement those Plan B conversations. So I'm going to ask Lynnette and Tania just to share any of your experiences with those Plan B conversations and how that's different from the way you've seen students approached in the past.
All right. So the question, Lynnette, were you going to say something? Go ahead, love.
No, go ahead with the question first.
I was just going to say, yeah, it said, this said, building on the Plan B conversations, how can we use this collaborative approach to empower students with learning disabilities who may have lost their confidence in their abilities, especially in environments where UDL is not yet formally integrated into the curriculum?
Well, I think that's the best thing about the Plan B conversation is that it's not about us telling them what to do, but them expressing what's the barrier for them and them giving you some ideas to how we can make them feel better. So for example, if a student has decided to disengage, this is the moment you start to ask those questions to find out why they have disengaged, to dig deeper until you get basically to that root cause of what is causing them to disengage. And this is the hardest thing in the Plan B conversation because we want to always guess and assume and think that we have the answer. And you have to kind of keep yourself in check through the whole conversation that you're not making an assumption, that they have to actually produce it for you. And as I was doing the modeling of that, I had to catch myself a couple of times because your brain is already going 3 steps ahead to what you think is where it needs to go. And that's not always where they take you. So I think that's the beauty of it. It's being guided by the student. So it works in any situation as long as you are receptive that they're leading it, not you.
I love that dynamic that we're learning from them as well, and we're learning something that's maybe relevant for that student, but it may be relevant for other students as well, right? What this one student is telling us might help us reveal barriers that are relevant for others as well.
We may have, oh, go ahead. Go ahead,
Sorry,
Tania.
I just did want to add, because the question was saying like they have lost confidence in what they know how to do. I would say like also focus on what they could do and then build from there. So that way they're able to kind of get back into building that confidence back up.
There were some questions in the chat about grade level, and we forgot to say this. So currently, Circle Up is designed for fourth and fifth grade, really with the goal of supporting them to be more independent as they transition to middle school. But we're very interested in expanding that to other grade levels. So if you want to work with us on that, let us know.
Yeah, like when there was one about secondary, and even though the tools were kind of ready-made, we did provide options and tools that were just the tool, and no, like for example, the emotion circle would just be blank, right? And so you could co-design or co-create that with your class with verbiage that students use, or it's really behind the purpose of the tool and not the tool itself, which is what we say all the time. Like, think about why we use the tool. Think about what the tool is supposed to be for, and not just use the tool as is, but to create it, as Tania showed, to think about what the purpose is and to use it where as in a manner that's more efficient for you and your class.
Lots of interesting questions about how do you get started with UDL if it's not kind of officially adopted? And I will say it's not officially adopted in the United States, right? It's written into a lot of policy and a lot of laws in the US, but it is certainly not fully known here across the country. So beginning small with wherever you have locus of control, right? Wherever you have an opportunity to try things out in your classroom. The same goes with the Plan B conversations, right? We've seen the most success with those when people have really just dove in and tried it out, as Ms. Sepulveda was saying, and her own experience of that. And then UDL, right? You can start very small with that, right? Within your own classroom, and then sharing that with other educators who might be in the classroom right next door. So let me link, there's a question in chat about where we can find these tools. I'm going to put the link to a Google Doc that will take you to all of the tools and strategies. They are free and open for you to use. So you'll see them all linked in that document. Oh, thank you. Our wonderful hosts created a bit.ly for us, so it's not quite so ugly. That all of the tools are linked in there. There are videos linked in there as well of teachers using them in their classrooms, and also explainer videos in there explaining what the tools are all about. I think it also links to the full Circle Up binder, so feel free to take that. It has lots of explanatory materials about how to use the tool and more background on the project. All right, I see that we are at time, so thank you so much for joining us. Please take a moment to fill out this feedback survey. We are really interested in learning from you, so fill out the survey so that we can learn more from you. Shauntā is putting our email addresses in the chat, so reach out anytime. It's been wonderful sharing this with you all. Get your tickets today for UDLCon live online, July 21st and 22nd. Today is just a taste of things that we will do about Circle Up and many other topics at UDLCon live. So scan that QR code or go to the bit.ly that we're putting in the chat. Got your ticket today, Lisa Smiley.
Yay!
Wonderful.
So awesome.
Love working with Lisa and her team. Thank you all so much for joining.
And just a special thanks to Tania and Lynnette for sharing with us. They are the stars of this show and just amazing as it relates to Circle Up and supporting the teachers and the students within the Circle Up program. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.